Hello, everyone, and welcome back to 305 Insights. Today, we're going to be focusing on recruiting class for 2024. We're going to be focusing primarily on two different rooms, the defensive line and the wide receiver room, both incredible hauls. And this is something that was expected out of Mario Cristobal when he was hired by the University of Miami. This is a man who believes in the old school, if you win in the trenches, everything will align itself. And last year, you saw with two five-star offensive linemen in the recruiting class. And this year, with the amount of talent that they're bringing on the defensive line, he is loading up on the trenches, ladies and gentlemen. And one thing that also needs to be pointed out, Jason Taylor is an elite recruiter, rated as the best recruiter in the ACC in terms of position coaches. He had a hand in a lot of this talent acquisition, and we're going to also discuss some of the there is day one level talent here, impact players day one, and there's also kids who are also going to be projects that are going to be molded in the way that this defensive staff sees best fit for their development and for the success within the system. However, we're not going to be talking about a certain high level acquisitions that they got as well. The most important one to me was Zaquan Patterson, third overall safety in the nation, 10th in the state of Florida in terms of overall player. With Cam Kitchens and James Williams leaving, he's going to be an important piece in the future for this team. Adarius Hayes, a notable flip from the University of Florida. Always good to see Gators lose out on talent. Linebacker, 7th in his position, 13th overall player in the state of Florida. Again, those are a couple players. One more flip. We had running back Jordan Lyle, who I believe was committed to Ohio State. 10th player in the running back class for this year. 21st overall in the state of Florida. They had to get him because Kevin Riley flipped to Alabama, and that was expected that he was going to flip. So this is something that, again, this coaching staff anticipated, and they were able to get a high-level 4-star talent in Jordan Lyle. So a couple more flips. We'll get to those. You know what? Let's just jump into that right now. The biggest flip that this coaching staff had was Justin Scott, originally committed to Ohio State out of Chicago, Illinois. He's the second overall defensive tackle, or just defensive lineman in the country, and the best player out of the state of Illinois. This is a kid, consensus 5-star, 6'5", 310 pounds. He has the explosiveness that scouts just dream about when it comes to defensive tackles. His elite speed allows for disruption in the interior, but he has this knack to convert that speed into power and just overwhelm these offensive linemen. They expect this kid to be a first-round pick in the future. Insiders compare him to Chris Jones out of the Kansas City Chiefs. Again, that level of athleticism where he is able to eat up the run, but also disrupt the quarterback and get those sack numbers. That isn't commonplace for defensive tackles. This kid should be special. And being developed by Jason Taylor, you can't ask for much more. Armando Blunt is the second part of this diamond class of defensive linemen. Justin Scott is clearly number one get. But Armando Blunt might have the most potential, which is crazy to say after what I just said about Scott. Blunt was supposed to be part of the 2025 recruiting class, reclassified to 2024, flipped to FSU, then on National Signing Day, flipped back to UM. Everybody was kind of expecting it, but still, nonetheless, a notable flip for this coaching staff. This kid is currently 16 years old, so by the time he gets on campus, should be 17. Don't know exactly when his birthday is, but still. 6'4", 250 pounds. The flexibility that they're going to have with this kid is crazy. Depending on how he matures and how he fills out that body, he's either going to be a great defensive tackle or a great defensive end. Put him through this strength and conditioning program. Have him learn under Jason Taylor. The speed that this kid has, the raw technique that he'll be able to fully master with this coaching staff, the sky's the limit. And just picture this, folks. Picture this. Justin Scott, Armando Blunt, Ruben Bain. Ruben Bain's going to be at for another 2 years. He plays a true freshman. He's going to have to play sophomore and junior before he can jump to the NFL. Imagine when he's a junior 2 years from now with Blunt and Scott being developed in year one. In year two, they should be making an impact for sure. They will see the field, in my opinion, year one. Those three kids are just going to run roughshod over so many offensive linemen in the ACC. This is talking about winning the game in the trenches. This is where you start winning it. Two great pickups. Two great, amazing flips by this coaching staff. Now we move on to slightly less talented. And when I say that, I mean that half jokingly because, again, those kids are 5-star kids. Now we're moving on to Marquise Lightfoot, a 4-star defensive end. Again, out of the state of Illinois, 7th overall edge player, 3rd best player out of that state. 6'5", 220 pounds. Great speed rusher. Uses his ability with that, again, when I say speed rusher, we're talking about that explosiveness right off the ball, right off, the snap count, right off the snap. He uses his agility and the speed to blow by these offensive lines to create havoc in the backfield. And when I say havoc in the backfield, it's not just sacking the quarterback, but if you have one of those read options, he's able to make up ground and tackle that running back from behind if he just doesn't guess right. That's the type of speed we're talking about with this kid. And again, only 220 pounds. Him filling out a little more, gaining more muscle with this strength and conditioning program. He should be an impact player in the next few years as well. We got Artavius Jones, a 4-star, 6'2", 285-pound defensive lineman, 22nd overall defensive lineman in the country, 24th best player in the state of Florida. This kid is the prototypical defensive tackle. Eats up the middle, overpowers the center based on the film. He loves using the A-gap. And he can shed double teams and is consistently in the backfield stuffing run plays. Even if he doesn't get there, again, consuming the double teams. Allowing guys like Scott or Blunt to roam free. Dangerous combination with these top 4 kids so far. Then we got Booger Pickett Jr. Kind of rolls off the tongue there. 4-star defensive end, 27th best edge player in the country, 33rd best player from the state of Florida. This kid's a legacy recruit. Dad played at his uncle played at Ohio State, who was a first-round pick in 2001, and I believe won championships with Green Bay, I believe. Might have played for another team as well. 6'3", 205 pounds. He's light for the position in terms of defensive end, but he uses his speed plus a go-to spin move as his bread and butter to accumulate the statistics that he did in high school. Based off of the scouting reports on multiple websites, there's rumblings that he may switch to linebacker, but again, it just depends on how he develops. If he puts on a little more mass, and then he could stay at defensive end, but if he slims down a little, leans up, you could see him at linebacker. So again, there's a lot of versatility so far in this class. Again, Armando Blunt, young kid, you don't know whether he's going to play defensive and defensive tackle. You got Booger Pickett Jr. Is he going to be a linebacker? Is he going to be a defensive end? There's just, again, it's the whole Swiss Army knife thing of where you can learn from Jason Taylor, a Hall of Fame defensive end. You can fit the type of role that you're expecting, a Swiss Army knife type thing. Just having that overall athleticism. That's what we preached in the FSU podcast. How much the athlete part stood out in a lot of their signings. You seeing with UM's recruiting not only the elite level potential that some of these players have, but again, the whole unearthing those special talents that some of these kids have, where they have all like the rankings here, the 4 stars, ranking best in the states and stuff like that. There's a lot of potential to be unlocked with technique and different things like that. And this is the right coaching staff to do it, ideally. That's what you want to believe as a fan. That's what you want to believe with the type of peoples that they have, with the defenses that they were running this year. You saw the improvements. Moving on, Elias Rudolph, 4-star defensive end, 33rd best edge player, 13th best out of the state of Ohio. 6'4", 205 pounds, another light defensive end. But again, we've got that twitchy nature with the elite ability to get off the ball as soon as it's snapped. He needs to improve his run defense from what I've seen. However, again, elite level speed that we're talking about. Can he play linebacker if needed? Can he grow into being a defensive end? This is one of those ones that I'm telling you about. High ceiling, but he's going to need time to develop and figure out where he fits. The last two, Rudolph and this kid, Cole McConaughey, are what I was talking about, where you can kind of see the potential, but they're not going to be seeing the field a lot. It's going to be in the film room, in practices, in the weight rooms, just working on those little things to develop and ideally see the field in the future and make an impact there. So Cole is a 3-star defensive end, 6'5", 235 pounds, 65th overall edge player, 36th overall player in the state of Alabama. This kid set the single season high school record for sacks in Alabama for 1 year. He had 24 and a half last year, I believe. And he also set the career record as well. He had over 60. High level motor. He uses his reaction ability, again, coming off the snap, and he uses speed to power combo to overwhelm offensive line. Great upside, but again, this one is a project for Jason Taylor. So we'll see how Jason Taylor develops him and where he fits in Guidry's system. Because, again, there's a lot of feints in that system, bringing people in, pushing people out to run zone coverages in terms of defensive linemen and stuff like that, blitzing with weak side linebackers, different things like that. So, again, there's a lot of potential within this defensive line class. I mean, we've spent the first half of this podcast literally just talking about this defensive line. There's that much talent on here so far. Flipping over to the offensive side of the ball now, we're going to focus on the 3 wide receivers that they brought in. Carr, 4th overall wide receiver. I'm sorry, he's a 4-star wide receiver. 12th overall wide receiver, 7th in the state of Georgia. This kid was committed to Georgia. Then there's rumblings that he was not satisfied with going there and was looking around. Mario Cristobal and the staff pounced on that, and they got a really, really dynamic route runner with great footwork and that speed and agility to make cuts and just break free in an open field. 5'11", 180 pounds, 44 TDs in 3 seasons of Georgia varsity football. When you think of explosive playmaker, think about that. 44 TDs in the state of Georgia. That's one of the top states in the country. A lot of people think they've started to eclipse California, and they're in the top three: Florida, Texas, Georgia, California. Those could all be intertwined outside of Florida, obviously. We kind of talked about that the other day. So, again, explosive playmaker, 9 cars is what comes to mind. And this is a kid who's going to fit in the slot, on the boundaries, trying to get those mismatches, and using that explosive playmaking ability to get those chunk yardage that will really complement this offensive line and the philosophy that Shane has and Mario has. A little old school mixed with the new school, ideally. Second wide receiver we're going to talk about is JoJo Trader, another 4-star wide receiver, 14th overall, 9th best player in the state of Florida, 6'1", 175 pounds. Scouts like to talk about his signature step back juke move that he likes to use in 1v1 situations to kind of get those extra yards after catch, showing off his game breaking ability. His strength, again, is, and this is from 247 Sports, they talk about his electric playmaking is something that they rarely seen. And he's either going to high point the ball in those toss up situations, whether it's a fade route or, again, just not necessarily in the red zone, but just tossing it up to him over the shoulder catch. He's going to track it. He's going to lay out for the ball. He's going to get the chains moving. And that's something that the scouts love about this kid. If he's got a window, he's going to take the ball to the house as well. It's not just being physical. It's his ability to make the plays initially and allowing for that play to grow with his ability to make cuts, create space, as a lot of announcers love to say in this past year, just plant the foot and go vertical, you know. Anyways, Chance Robinson is the last kid we're going to talk about. 24th overall wide receiver in the country, 19th best player in the state of Florida, 6'2", 195 or 190 pounds. He's already a plus run blocker, which is something Mario's going to love, obviously. He can easily beat press coverage because of the way he uses leverage with his hands, and he's got really quick feet for his size. This kid is going to be, again, a QB's dream in the red zone. He excels at jump balls or the fade routes. Doesn't really have that game-breaking speed, but he does have good speed that allows for him to beat cornerbacks on those vertical routes or go routes. So these 3 kids, they just need a quarterback. And wasn't really a high-end quarterback delivered in this class. Last year, Riley Williams, I believe is his name, 3-star kid. You saw him in action against Florida. I'm sorry, Florida State. So you got to wonder who they're going to get in terms of them transferring in, because Tyler Van Dyke left for Wisconsin. So I don't think Ja'Cory Brown's staying. He's going to play in the bowl game, but I don't think he's staying next year. So kind of waiting on Cam Ward, seeing what he does. You kind of waiting on, is it Will Howard, the kid from Kansas State, who everybody thought was going to USC because Malachi Nelson, the 5-star kid, is going to transfer out. Now the rumor is he's going to be tied to Ohio State because they need a quarterback. So is Cam Ward going to go pro, or is he going to go to FSU, or is he going to go to Miami? KJ Jefferson was rumored to go to UM as well to take some visits, but now UCF is seemingly the favorite to land him. Mario has done a great job on the trenches. He's brought in some high-level transfers as well at linebacker, cornerback, again on the offensive line. You had some running backs as well. But you also have talent at the running back position. You've got talent on the offensive line. You got talent on the defensive line. You got you're solid at the corners. We'll see how the safeties develop. You've got young talent on the wide receiver side. Where does this team go with two back-to-back elite level recruiting? Again, high level talent in the trenches. You've got good to great talent at the skill positions. You got to start developing these kids. I'm really high on Justin Scott. I'm really high on Armando Blunt. I think Nikar is going to be a really great playmaker for this team. JoJo Trader as well. Chance, I think, is going to take a little more time to develop. But again, you're seeing the upside. You're seeing the immediate ability that some of these kids are going to have, and you're seeing what needs to be developed by this coaching staff. Now, the downside of what I think is happening over at FSU, and I don't mean to mix these two teams in, but again, we primarily focus on FSU and RUM. FSU hasn't done great at recruiting the high school level. Norvell just had his first top 10 class since he's been there, and they had to have a 13-0 season to build off of that. Mario Cristobal had a top 10 recruiting class off of a 5-7 season. He goes 7-5, and he has a top 5 recruiting class. You got to start getting the wins. You got to start showing the results on the field. I believe that there's a lot of good coaches. Remember, we did a podcast at the beginning of the college football season of what we expect from this coaching staff. I know Mario has a lot of issues when it comes to in-game decisions. We saw that at Georgia Tech. All you had to do was essentially kneel down the ball and you win the game. We saw that at the end of the Clemson game where there's time. Was it halftime? Or was it at the end of the game as well where you could have pushed the ball and you played conservative? You still won that game, but again, a lot of this stuff comes back to bite you. The clock management isn't that great. We said a long time ago as well that in order for the Sunshine State to come back, they need to hold down the talent that's in here. Now, you have to diversify. You've already saw it with Justin Scott, best player of Illinois, Marquise Lightfoot, third best player of Illinois. But you have Armando Blunt. Again, he's one of the top 2 defensive linemen in the country. You had Justin Scott, number 2, Armando Blunt, number 3. This is the number 1 player, again, in the state of Illinois. Armando Blunt's the number 5 player in the state of Florida. Again, this is a 16-year-old, 17-year-old when he gets on campus. It's going to be, he's already considered the 5th best player in the state of Florida. Talent-rich state, the best state to get high school recruits. You're getting the trenches, you're getting the recruits in. It's time to develop them, folks. It's time to develop them. Again, I thought this year that should have gone. Again, the ceiling was, I believe I said 9-3. The floor was 7-5. I should have thought they got in 8-4. That Georgia Tech game really threw off the season. Because you can, in an honest conversation going into the season, you can justify, and I believe I said that they were going to beat Texas A&M. I was convinced of that. I didn't think they would beat Clemson. I thought they would have trouble with UNC, and I thought they would have trouble with NC State because it was at NC State. So those are where I figured the losses would come from, and they'd have one hiccup here or there. I did not expect them to lose to Georgia Tech. That's one of those games where ideally next year, that's one of the ones where you you get out alive, like Mike Tomlin says. Just get lucky to get out of the stadium alive. Like it's some sort of like battle to the death in football. But this coaching staff needs to improve on those on-field decisions, game time decisions, clock management, different things like that. Whether that's on Mario, on everybody else, for me, it falls on Mario's shoulders. And it's going to be year 3 of an 8-year contract. You're not getting rid of him anytime soon. You're seeing the results off the field. I'm going to be more high on this team next year once we figure out the transfer portal stuff than I was on them this year. So we'll see how that develops. Again, great job by this coaching staff to flip a lot of high-end talent like Blunt, Scott. You can count Nykar as a flip to me. And again, you took away Adarius Hayes from Florida. So an in-state rival, you were able to take him away. You're able to take away Jordan Lyle away from the Big Ten, a historically strong running conference, and from one of the powerhouses in college football. And that's something that I believe should be commended. Obviously, we expected this recruiting staff, not just Mario, but everybody else who he employs. And again, Jason Taylor, amazing, amazing signing as a coach. You expected this high level recruiting. But you're also seeing that they're able to convince these kids from going to Ohio State, a program that, again, they went 11-1 last year. I know they've lost 3 years in a row to Michigan, but there's a program that, with these kids growing up, Ohio State's been one of the most consistent college football playoff committee or consistent college football playoff teams. I don't want to say the committee part. We all know how I feel about the committee. We don't have to dive into that again. This is one of the most consistent programs in the country over the past decade plus. They're flipping kids from Ohio State, from Georgia, from Florida State. They're keeping a lot of these kids home. The Sunshine State needs to be locked down for the 3 big schools, as much as I dislike Florida, who they had a horrible recruiting day. But it's good to see this type of talent coming into UM. It's up to this staff to figure out where they're going to take it to the next level. So, that being said, we've wrapped up UM and FSU's recruiting classes. We're going to wait a little longer till after some of these bowl games. I'll probably review the bowl games for UM against Rutgers and the FSU Orange Bowl game. And then I believe after that, in my opinion, we're going to see a lot of development come out of the transfer portal with these 2 schools. So we'll ideally, if a lot of news comes out and a lot of talent starts moving in one direction or another, we'll do transfer portal podcasts as well. So look forward to the game reviews for UM Rutgers and FSU Georgia. And again, thanks for stopping by, folks. It's awesome doing the research and seeing these kids and what they could be for the future of these programs. So again, thanks for listening. Have a good one, and we'll see you next time on 305 Insights.